Hi, this is Jonesy with Jetters Northwest, and welcome to the Eagle-300 and Eagle-600 trailer jetter training session. In this training session, we'll cover safety, we'll get you acclimated to the jetter with a full walk around, we'll talk about the controls, maintenance, and of course operations, everything you need to get started running your jetter. Now, this is not a replacement for the paper manuals and the PDF manuals that come with your jetter. Number one, there'll be a bag in the toolbox that has some paperwork and your paper manuals for the engine and the trailer, but there's also a flash drive in there that has the PDF manuals for the jetter operation and maintenance itself. Definitely recommend that you get through those, give them a look before you take the jetter out in the field. If you want, just email info@jettersnorthwest.com and we can email those straight to your email, or if you provide a textable number, we can text them to you directly or your people in the field if they need them. But let's get started and walk you through your new jetter. All right, let's walk around the unit, starting up with the tongue and hitching it up. I'll go through a full hitching detail in another scene, but just so you know what you need, it's a 2 5/16 receiver here, so you'll need a 2 5/16 ball. If you ordered it with a pintle ring, then you'll be equipped with a pintle hook on your truck. But you can see we've got an adjustable height here. But I also like to have, this is an adjustable height hitch mechanism that we purchased. This is not something that's included with the jetter. You can get these at any local trailer supply place. And by the way, we encourage you to get associated with a local trailer service place, because that's often the quickest place you can get service on if it's something to do with the trailer, not to do with the jetting system. You don't need to wait in line at a dealer that works on high pressure pump cleaning equipment just to get a hitch fix or something like that. So find yourself a local trailer service place. But even though this is adjustable, I like to have an adjustable one of these, because then you can switch it for different vehicles without having to mess with these. These are impact tightened. They are not easy to get off, but they are adjustable with the up and down. You'll also want to have a brake controller in your truck, because we've got a 7-pin connector that will activate the brakes of the trailer. So you want to make sure you outfit your vehicle if it's not already. Most vehicles these days are set up for this, and a brake controller is often standard, but if it's not for the vehicle you have, you'll want to get it set up with full brake control on a 7-pin receiver. Okay, let's move over here up the tongue. We'll talk about the jack later. We've got a 12-gallon fuel tank here. Just use 87 octane unleaded gas, nothing extra hot. And you can see there's primer bulbs on here, one for each engine on this dual engine system. You will never really have to use those unless possibly you run out of fuel, especially on a hot day, and the engine might have a little trouble picking up the prime. So as you're starting it, you can use your wireless remote control if you're equipped wireless remote, which most of them are, and just hit the ignition, pump these up a little bit, and it takes right off. So again, you do not have to use the primer bulbs every time you start it. All right, we'll move on to the trailer in the next scene. Okay, whether you've got an Eagle 300 gallon or Eagle 600 gallon, this trailer or your trailer is made to tow a full load of water to the job site at highway speeds. And again, as I said in the previous scene, it's important that you have the brakes activated. If you do not have brakes activated via your vehicle, do not drive the trailer with water in it, okay? You need that stopping power that the brakes on here can offer you. So your 600 gallon Eagle 600 and Eagle 300 gallon are identical, except that your 600 gallon unit, if you have that, has tandem axles, 2 sets of wheels and axles versus just one, and it's going to have 2 300 gallon tanks instead of just one. So the Eagle 300, as we're looking at here, has 1 300 gallon tank, and we've got enough axle here to support that. Now, as you drive about, say, your first 20-30 miles, you want to stop and check the tension of your lug nuts. In fact, you should check them before you take them out on the road for the first time. But everything is snugged up here from here at the factory. And of course, check your tire inflation per the specs on the tire. You will have some info on the tires in your trailer manual. And of course, always every day, just inspect for gouges or anything on your trailer, on your tires, just real quick to make sure it's safe to take on the road. Your toolboxes here, there's a locking key that is the same for both sides. You've got a box on both sides on most models. And you've got all this room here on a water sealed box. for those of you who have 2 boxes, it's not a bad idea to have one be your clean box and one be your dirty box. At the dirty box, you know, you're not intermingling with things you want to keep clean. Okay, let's talk about getting water to your Eagle-300 or Eagle-600 trailer jetter. There are 2 points you can provide water to it. You can put high flow water, such as a hydrant water, to this air gap fill, 2-inch air gap fill, or classic garden hose or hose bib water supply right here. Let's start with that. This is the most common way the guys supply water to the machine. Now, if you're going to have a municipality, you may have ordered it without one of these because you always fill from hydrant. But most contractors often are going to a hose bib, and you've got 100 feet of nice industrial hose that is kind of kink-free to just simply connect to a hose bib and get started. If you're going to extend this for any reason, now this is 100 feet, I recommend that you at least get 3/4 inch, if not even step up to 1 inch. And again, don't buy cheap garden hoses, 5/8 that kink and stuff. Use a nice industrial water hose like we've supplies for you. But here you've got 100 feet of hose on a reel. The reel locks. So when you're driving down the road, you can lock it up. This is a stowage point. But when you're connected up and providing water to the jetter, it actually comes up here and fills in from the top. And a feature here is this has a float valve. So just like a toilet tank, when the water tank is full, it's going to shut off the water. You don't have to babysit the water supply. And when the jetter starts up and is jetting again and starts drawing water, it'll automatically have water come in, again, just like a toilet tank. So that's the common fill point. But let's talk about the air gap fill. If you do have hydrant access or an industrial access that gives you high flow water, you can connect here. This is a cam coupler. You could thread it off and put on a fire hose coupler if you want. You can adapt it to just about anything to have when you have that high flow connection availability. And it comes here to an air gap. And you'll want to take the lid off, of course, and make sure when you're done filling that you put the lid back on and tighten it up tight, because we are often getting calls from guys that forgot to tighten up their lid and the lid disappeared when they're driving from one job to the next. One thing we want to discourage is dropping a garden hose or 2 into your water tank, because that can be an infraction. You can get tagged or fined by the water department or something because you don't have an anti-backflow situation there. That's what the air gap is for. If for some reason you do want to add more garden hose supply, say you're filling from there and you want more water supply from somewhere else, tie the hose up here so there's still an air gap, okay? Otherwise, again, somebody opens up the hydrant in the water department, it can suck water out of your tank into the water system. That's not potable water, and you can get tagged or fined. It's just not the right thing to do. So use one of these 2 water supplies, is the best way you can go. Okay, before you do anything operating your jetter, you're going to need to hook the battery up. Just about anywhere in the USA, we're able to ship these, or in Canada with the battery. If you're overseas, we probably could not ship it with the battery and you have to provide your own. But it is a Group 24 battery, and we ship it with the negative battery terminals disconnected because we cannot ship it with those connected. So you'll have no power until you install and snug up those negative cables, as we've already done here. And then you can put it back together, strap it up, and you're good to be on the road. Make sure you strap it tight so this cover doesn't disappear on you. Okay, here we are at the business end of your Eagle-300 or Eagle-600 jetter. And let's show you the controls here. This is a DWR model, which is the most common type we make today of the Eagle-300 or Eagle-600 series. DWR means it's a deluxe unit with the wireless remote control. On DWR models, you'll come standard with a beacon light. It's an option to the standard models. You can see right here on the panel, I've got a switch to turn the light on. You don't have to have the engine on or anything. It's live all the time. You can drive down the road with the beacon on if you want. We can turn that on. Right next to it, we have an auxiliary switch. And just to show you, right here, we've got a 12-volt outlet where you can plug in your tablet or cell phone or something to that effect. You know, if you've got a spotlight, multi-candle power light, you want to plug in, anything like that. So you can see here as I swiveled the reel, DWR models in the Eagle-300 and Eagle-600 size have the pivoting reel. Now, if you have the standard unit, your reel is not going to do that. It's just going to be locked in place. But this is a multi-position 180-degree swiveling reel, so we just got to move this lever out of the way, and we can pick different positions to lock it into, all the way around, both directions. And then you just aim it whichever direction you want for optimum jetting, whether you're going curbside or this way or that way, or down into a manhole. Okay, next, let's talk about the controls here as I'll walk you down the control panel, which obviously swivels with the hose reel. Starting on top, we have two different engine starts because this is a 2-engine, 2-pump system. This particular model is a 20 gallon per minute model, which is most common of the Eagle-300, Eagle-600 size. And each engine is responsible for 10 gallons a minute. 10 gallons a minute from this pump engine plus 10 gallons a minute from this pump engine gives you the 20 gallon per minute capability. But you can run them separately, especially if you're going to use a pressure wash gun or a mini jetting hose. You would just run one of these. But when you're running off the main jet hose that comes on the trailer, you're going to be running both of them. They're fuel injected, so you just push the button to start. You turn this to panel control. You can see it light up. And then we can start our engines and be off and running. Now, if you're going to run remote control, you turn the switch over here to the remote position, and then you'll be active to run wireless remote control. We'll come back to that. But walking down the panel, each engine has an hour meter and allows you to kind of match the hours of each one, especially if you use single engine operation for small hoses commonly. You can kind of watch those hours, and also for oil changes. Here's your throttle control. Even though there's two engines, there is just one throttle control, so you don't have to balance anything if you're running two engines. As soon as they're started, you got a single engine throttle to bring your engine speed, which basically means your GPM up and down, which makes your pressure go up and down. And then here you've got your water on, which means jetting on and jetting off. Very simple. Now these are duplicated on your wireless remote. We have engine on for engine 1, engine on for engine 2, and then there's the start button, so I would turn to remote control, and you can hear it light up. I can start the engine, I can start the second engine, kill, and then I have a throttle here, the tortoise and the hare for higher throttle, lower throttle, and pressure on and off. We put that right up top. It's kind of right where your thumb wants to be to go jetting on. You might hear the automated valve there moving, jetting off. Pretty simple. And then right here we have a control for hose wind. So let's go down the panel here. This button replaces this button on your hose reel control. So right down here we have a wind or unwind position for the hose. There's also a neutral, where if I push the button it just does nothing. But most common thing is to wind up the hose. We have an adjustable variable speed for the wind up. So now we can push the button and wind it up at whatever speed we've got it set for. Or if we want to pull a whole bunch of hose and go around a building, very common, and we don't want to be pulling hard on this hose reel, we can push unwind, grab our wireless remote control, and start walking away from the machine and getting an assist from that power reel. Now this won't rewind though unless we have it in wind up position. So now I can rewind, and it's going to wind at whatever speed this variable speed is set to. So that's the remote and the manual wind up for the hose reel. Back into the panel, there's obviously your pressure gauge. See, it says here, do not exceed 4,000 PSI. If you have a 3,000 PSI mantle, it'll say do not exceed 3,000 PSI. Now, the jetter is capable of exceeding it because we don't push it to its absolute limit, but we recommend do not do that. That will wear out your engines quicker, wear out your pump quicker, can expose hoses to bursting. Stick to the maximum pressure, period. Okay, and down here, we have a pressure regulating valve. Generally when we're running off the main hose, I use throttle up and down to just raise and lower pressure. But this will also make sure it sets the maximum. So if you're, say, jetting an old Orangeburg pipe or something, and you don't want to go over 2,500 PSI, you can set this to maximum 2,500. So no matter what you throttle it to, it won't go there, okay? This is also important for when you're using mini hoses. I recommend that you back this off about 3 full turns. When you're using a mini hose, like a 1/4-inch hose or a little trap jetting hose, you need to bring this down a little bit so the extra pressure that's built up in that little teeny hose doesn't jack us up over 4,000 PSI, okay? So this is, again, to make sure you don't get any higher than you want to be. Do not exceed maximum pressure ever. And the last thing we haven't talked about here on the panel is the pulse control. We have an adjustable pulsation, which as you crack this open, it'll create more and more hose pulsation. For those of you who aren't familiar, pulsation just basically makes the hose shake. So when the hose is inside a pipe and it's dragging along the pipe, creating a little bit of a bounce can break the tension of that hose on the pipe and help it get around corners and get further up the line. You generally don't want to jet all the time with the pulse on for 2 reasons. Number one, it cuts down your pressure. You're diverting water flow and GPM. You're lowering your GPM and your pressure. You'll see your pressure go down when you open this up, but it is not the pressure regulator, okay? You want to generally keep this closed and off. It's just to get your hose further up the line, or if your nozzle is stuck, it's wonderful to go a little bit forward, open that pulse wide open, throttle down a little bit, and bounce that nozzle off, and it'll pop right off of whatever's holding it down. Before we take the jetter in the field to do any jetting, we got to do some daily maintenance checks. So let's go under the hood. As we mentioned here, we have a 2-engine, 2-pump system. We also have 2 transmission gearboxes. So let's look at the oil checkpoints on these. Here with the Kawasaki engines, particularly, the yellow cap is your oil fill point. And we have our dipstick. So I pull this out, you can take a look. There shows the low and the high marks. And your oil should be nice and clean like this. If your oil starts to look really dark, you've probably been ignoring it. You want to be changing your oils every 100 hours. And you change the oil filter, which is right down here. You change the oil filter every other oil change. Now there is a break-in that's shorter than that. After about 40 hours, give or take, you want to change the oil. It's 10W40 motor oil, and change the filter. And then again, after that, like I said, it goes every 100 hours, changing the oil filter every other time. Now, moving on to the other points that have oil, we have the transmission gearbox in between. It takes 80-90 gear oil, which is easy to find pretty much anywhere it sells motor oil. And basically you fill the transmission gearbox, as well as the water pump, which takes a different oil, half full. And there's a sight glass right down here on the transmission gearbox. You just need to get the oil into that sight glass. Now, some of your older models, if you're seeing this, you might have a plug there, and you don't have any sight glass at all, so you just take the plug out and you fill it till you see oil start to drool out of that area, and plug it back off. But most of the newer models have a sight glass. You don't want to overfill it, because if you do overfill it with the gear oil on the transmission, it will puke out what it doesn't want out this breather. Okay, so every once in a while we get a call, hey, my transmission's leaking, my gearbox is leaking oil, and it's actually not. They overfilled it and it's just spilling out what it doesn't want. And this is, of course, your fill point, where you're going to unscrew that with a wrench, and that's the point where you'll fill up the oil. The drain plug is underneath it on the bottom, as it is for the engine and the pump. Moving over to the water pumps, or the high pressure pumps, here's the fill point, which is also a breather. If by chance you lose this, you don't want to just stick a pipe plug in there, because then the engine or the pump can't breathe and you could blow out your oil seals. It also has a dipstick, and you want the oil to the top of this little channel. But an easier way to check oil level is with the sight glass, which is right here, and there's one on the back side of the pump that's even easier to see. And basically, again, you want that oil to be about half full on the pump, at least half full on the pump. And if you overfill it, it'll tend to want to blow out the top again, so don't overfill. You're also looking for the color of the oil. If the oil starts to look gray or milky, you want to tag out. Don't take the jetter out. You need to change that oil. And if it keeps getting oil milky really quick, you've probably worn out your seals, high pressure seals in your pump, and you're getting water blow by into the crankcase. That definitely you want to not jet, because you're wiping out the bearings in the back of your pump. You keep good clean oil in this pump, these bearings will last a long, long, long time. Okay, let me show you where you drain your water tank. The main drain here is just past the fuel tank inside the tongue. Simply pull this out and let her drain before you fill up. Close it up. All right, now that you've checked your oils and they're good, we've got to check our water filter. This is something that gets ignored by a lot of people. It's one of the easiest things you can do to take care of your jetter and make sure that its pumps are not getting starved by a blocked water filter. So we got to reach down in here. We have a lockout valve. If you have a full tank of water, you might want to close this out so you're not dumping water out the filter. And if you look down in here all the way down, this is typically hand tight. And out comes the water filter assembly. Dump out what's in there, and you want to clean anything that's in there out of here. Now you can often rinse this with the drain of the jetter, or if you leave that water open, you can rinse it with the water that's coming out of the strainer body down below. But if you've got some stuff that's stuck in there pretty well, you're going to want to take like a toothbrush or something and clean it out real well. Then you want to make sure that this O-ring seal here is good and no chunks out of the O-ring. I do it by feel. And then you just tighten it up again, hand tight with the good, make sure it's all the way down, hand snug, and you'll be ready to jet again once you've filled up with water. Okay, last thing we're going to do is check the air filters and the antifreeze level in our engines. So as we work toward the back here, we have an air filter gauge. When this is running, if it's sitting up here, this yellow diaphragm, if it's in the green, our air filters are good. As the air filters, which are behind here, start to get fouled, it's going to pull, when it's running, pull that down, that yellow diaphragm down. When it gets into the red, time to change your air filter. And they're just right in here, pretty simple to pull these snaps back, pull the cover off, and you can pull the filters out. Or you can have a service person do that for you. Last thing to check here is on the back side, we want to make sure that our glycol level for our engines, these are liquid cooled engines, should be up there at about that 2/3 mark here as you're into this whole gauge low high, and that's plenty. This is just an overflow. So you want to make sure that green level is right there. Okay, one thing that you need to check every month is underneath here there's a Zerk fitting to give your axles a shot of lube here. I'm not going to take this off right now, but you'll see there's a grease zerk there. You need a grease gun to do that kind of maintenance. Next, let's talk about getting hitched up to the trailer. Now, it is the responsibility of the driver to make sure that things are hitched properly, okay? Even if you have somebody else hitch it up for you, you want to come out and inspect it. So let's talk about A to Z, how this should look. Okay, first, you see I'm all lined up here. Again, standard, we got a 2 5/16 inch ball. If you do have a pintle ring that you had us do custom, that's a different procedure. But if you specified that, you're probably familiar with that. Back to the ball hitch, we'll want to pull the pin before we drop it onto the ball and get this pulled all the way up. That opens the mouth of this receiver. And now we can drop down onto the ball. And as soon as the hitch is, or the jack is off the ground, I like to lift it up. Okay, one of the things that a lot of guys accidentally do is they forget to do this. And you don't have to keep winding by hand with this as a drop jack, so you can just raise it up there real quick. Push the pin back through that's hanging on the chain. Now that's up and out of the way. You know, a lot of guys forget to do that and they drive away and catch a speed bump or a curb and thrash this whole thing and it needs to be repaired. Okay, back over to the hitch. Now we've got this secured and up and out of the way. We've got to make sure the ball is secure. So we drop this down. You want to make sure you pin it so it keeps that locked and secured. So now it's pinned. The mouth can't open. I know I'm locked down as I can pull up and down. I'm in good shape here. Next step is the chains. The two chains should be crossed over each other. So I take the left-hand chain, swing it under, and make connection to the frame of the truck. At the access point, take the right-hand chain, hit the left-hand access lock point, get it chained in. And these little clips, I'm gonna make sure they're not hung up back here. That's not gonna stay. Bring it so the retainer is holding it in position. It's not gonna fall off on me. Next, this trailer, as our Eagle-200 models, Eagle-300 models, Eagle-600 models, all have brakes. And this is the safety breakaway. If some reason the trailer came off the ball and chains cave loose, the trailer's left behind, it's gonna pull this pin out because we're gonna connect this to the truck, which will activate the brakes of the trailer and make it stop. Okay, now you don't want to hook this up generally to the same place where you hooked your chains, because if you run this right next to your chain hook, it's going to beat up on it, it's going to thrash through this eventually, and it'll break. Okay, I like to connect it to the hitch mechanism, like here, or you can run it through the frame somewhere on your trailer, or on your truck, I should say, or you can get a big eye hook here and connect it to something on the truck. Here again, I've gone through the nice big hitch mechanism, and then I just got to reconnect it here and create the loop. I like to take it one step further as I double connect it, and that allows it to slide back and forth so you can tension it up. I don't want this hanging down on the ground, so I can pull it back. Still got a nice loop. I'm in good shape there. And by the way, if your chains are a little bit long, you can disconnect them and just twist them, and it shortens it up a little bit. You don't want them tight like that they're going to bind. You want them just at a medium length there. That's pretty good. And lock it in. Okay, lastly, we want to provide power to our trailer. So we have the 7-pin connection plug, as I mentioned before. And we're going to plug that in. And at that point, before I hit the road, I'm going to check the lights. I'm going to turn my lights to park so that the marker lights all come on before I drive. I'm going to check my turn signals left and right. And of course, if it's dark out, I'm going to turn my lights all the way on. But we definitely want to make sure that those turn signals are functioning left and right, and that the brake lights are coming on with your foot. These are all, again, daily inspections you need to do before you hit the road for everybody's safety and your own. Now, speaking of personal safety, let's take a moment and talk about your personal protective equipment. Now, PPE is a personal thing, and you as the operator are responsible for that, okay? But if you look at what I'm doing here, I've got my safety glasses I can put on, protect my eyes. That is absolutely the number one. You might want to wear a face shield if you want to protect yourself from back blast, especially if you're doing some indoor jetting where your face is close to the cleanout. I like to have my arms covered. I'm always wearing gloves. You might want a double glove, put your rubber gloves underneath gloves, whatever you want to do. I like to have my legs covered. You want to wear some good shoes or boots to cover your feet. Again, personal protective equipment is something that we've all got to take seriously, especially again with a high pressure water jetting piece of equipment. All right, before we get jetting, we're gonna need some nozzles and accessories, so let's open up the tool bin. With the DWR Eagle-300 and 600 models, there are tandem tool bins. So, firstly, you're gonna have your manuals, as I described, the Kawasaki engine manuals right here. And by the way, if you're gonna get service locally on your Kawasaki engines, you need to look for a Kawasaki Power Service Center, not necessarily like a motorcycle shop, okay? Because this is a classic 4-stroke engine, but there's lots of Kawasaki Power, and Kawasaki's are huge in the zero-turn mower lawn care industry. So a good place to look for a local service center for your engines. Your jetter manual is on this flash drive, as I mentioned earlier. And again, we can email you or text you PDF manuals for the jetter or any of these. Your keys, there's two different sets of keys. You've got keys for the engine, and then you've got keys for all these doors. Okay, moving on to accessories. Tiger tail hose guide. This is to protect your hose as you go into a clean out. You know, the edge of the clean out might have a sharp edge which can cut your hose. As I mentioned, we want to protect our hose from being cut. So we put the guide in first, and then we thread the hose through along with the nozzle, and now this is a nice slick guide. It also helps the hose pull back smoother because it's very slick on the inside. There's a whole video on this. Look up on YouTube, Jetters Northwest, protect your hose and yourself. You'll get a demo on this. A item that doesn't get used a lot and should be used more is the safety leader hose. What this is an extension that comes off of your main, you take your main jetting hose, thread it on, you just double tighten that up with a wrench, and then put your favorite jetting nozzle on the end of this, tighten it up. And what it does, especially if you're going into a deep manhole or a catch basin, or even a clean out if you can, it gives you this nice big orange 10-foot warning that you're getting close to the end. And that the nozzle, if you don't stop pulling the hose back, is going to come flying out of the pipe. And again, water jets can cut you. The biggest safety concern is, number one, do not ever allow in any way, shape, or form that nozzle to come out of the pipe, because generally it's not just going to fall on the ground. If it gets out of the pipe, it flies every which way. I've been hit in the face with a nozzle. I'm lucky I still have a right eye. But the safety leader hose does not always get used because it does make this big long joint, and that might not get around every corner in your pipe. So primarily, again, it's used for dropping into manholes and catch basins where it's too dark to see whether you're getting close to the end of the hose or not. Okay, moving on, we have a nozzle extension. This is an item that you would screw onto the end of the hose, screw your nozzle onto it, and it makes the whole assembly too long to flip around in the pipe and turn around and come back at you. So this is for safety, to anti-turnaround, generally used in pipes 8-inch and larger. But if you have a 6-inch, you want to kind of settle that nozzle down at the bottom of the pipe. It kind of helps settle it. If you want, also we have ones with fins that will lift it up off the bottom of the pipe and center it. That's an option. We have a video on that. It's called Extensions and Centralizers. You can take a look at on YouTube. And lastly, of the accessories before we get to the nozzles is our quick coupler adapter to adapt to accessories. So we take the end of our jetting hose and thread this on, tighten that up, and now we have a pressure washer type of quick coupler. So like a pressure washing gun, but more commonly for us, our small hose reels have small 1/4-inch hose on them, 3/16 hose, 3/8 hose, 5/16 hose. We set them up with a quick coupler so you can just snap couple it on, and you can switch from one to the other real easily with this quick coupler adapter. Okay, and next scene we'll get into nozzles. All right, with all of our Eagle jetters, or our Brute jetters for that matter, you will receive standard a 4-nozzle set. Primary, most commonly used nozzle is the penetrator nozzle, and it's called that because it has a forward penetrating water jet. And then it has 6 rear jets out the back to pull it into the pipe. And by the way, if you're not familiar, you might ask, why aren't all the jets going out the front? Aren't I trying to blast things out in front of me? Well, that's true, yes. And there are nozzles that do that, but we also need the nozzle to be able to pull the hose in the line. When you're jetting, if you've not done it, you're not feeding so much the hoses, unless you're doing a very small hose through a P-trap. The nozzle's pulling the hose into the pipe. So there's always more water going out the back than there is out the nose, except for special circumstances. So that's the 1 forward 5 back or 1 forward 6 back common penetrator, multi-purpose nozzle. This is a flusher nozzle where there is nothing coming out the front. All the water's coming out the tail, and it has a lot of pulling power because there's no front jet pushing against it. And it's great for just back flushing a line, especially say like a storm drain, or anytime you can just pull material back toward you, toward a catch basin or an interceptor or something. Great ability to move material back. The total opposite is what we call the pusher nozzle. Pusher nozzle has 6 jets out the rear, but it has 3 jets out the front. And this is often used to just push stuff, try to nudge stuff away from the building out to the street. It doesn't pull really well because there's so much water coming out the front, but it can be very nice for just pushing debris away from you and kind of general blasting. Last of the 4 standard nozzles is the high-speed rotating nozzle. This has 2 jets rotating at a very high speed. It sounds like a dentist drill when it's running. This is great for your soft grease, your soft sludge. Not a great cutter. We'll talk about cutter nozzles here in a moment, but this makes a super high-pitched dentist drill sound. A lot of guys will use it as a final polish and tell the customer, we're polishing your line right now, and it makes a nice, beautiful sound. So very recognizable in that. Sometimes you can kind of locate where you are in the line, by the way, with that high-pitched sound if it's not too far out. You'll also get an orifice cleaner. Little holes in the nozzle that the water comes out we call orifices. There's a single cleaner in this kit, and also Jetter's Northwest multi-orifice cleaner that's also included. It's brand new. Okay, next we'll get into the optional nozzles that are very common for these Eagle jetters. Okay, more times than not, customers don't just settle on the standard 4 nozzles. They'll want a premium nozzle for doing cutting and heavy flushing. So the most common are the Reaper, the Warthog, and our heavy grenade flusher. And we also do the Bulldog as well as some others, Root Rangers and so on. Let's talk about the Reaper. It's super popular right now. The Reaper is a wonderful first attack tool for blockages. Has a sharp single water jet that comes out the front that rotates very quick, so it looks like a cone, and that creates a high cutting action. So great to attack roots and blockages. And it also, that cone can kind of scoop material, so you can, if you have to jet from the building toward the street, it can just push debris away and nudge that debris out to the street even faster than a standard pusher nozzle. But again, it's real, the beauty of this is with this machine, with 18 gallons a minute or 20 gallons a minute, you can, with one of these nozzles, we did a demo, it's on YouTube, we cut through a 2x12 board in about 3 seconds. And we cut a perfect 4-inch hole in it in less than a minute. With that kind of 18 or 20 gallon a minute flow, you could do a 6-inch and cut a 6-inch hole. So the point is, wonderful tool for dealing with blockages. It's got thrust jets to push it along, and it can back flush as well a little bit. But call that the downstream attacker. The Warthog is fantastic for catching the things that the Reaper misses. And it does have a forward coring jet that moves a lot slower. This relies on what's called controlled rotation. It rotates slowly, but the 2 rear jets here are the stars of the show. Thick, rotating jets that anything that Reaper misses, this you get the Warthog past where the roots were coming in, let's say, or you got some heavy grease, it's at the top of the pipe, the Reaper's missing, and these 2 jets just scour hard and tear the rest of it out of there. Also wonderful for the storm lines, maybe have a lot of silt at the bottom, and that rotating, slow rotating jet just dredges up that silt. And then when you can jet upstream and pull material back to you, such as going manhole to manhole or you entered an interceptor and you can pull it back, okay, this is going to give that a great scour and pull that material back toward you real well. With like storm lines and whatnot, general cleaning, bigger sewers, the heavy grenade is really wonderful because it's heavy. It keeps the hose down at the bottom of the pipe for flushing. It also has turnaround technology inside the body of the nozzle that smoothly turns that water around and gets it out the water jets. So these water jets really carry. So when you're doing larger lines and storms and whatnot, really encourage you to look at getting a heavy flusher nozzle. We also, I don't have it with me here, but we have flat nozzles that jet just the bottom of the pipe. So even bigger storm lines where all the debris is at the bottom, no reason to waste water spraying the top of the pipe when all the material's at the bottom. It's like a shovel just to pull that material out there. If you have any questions on particular jobs and you're looking for a nozzle to attack a certain problem, give us a call, 877-901-1936, or send us an email, info@jettersnorthwest.com. We got just about every nozzle solution that will fit any jetter that's about 60 gallons a minute and below. For those of you that purchased the optional antifreeze winterization system, let me walk you through the steps of how to winterize your system via an antifreeze purge. The number one thing we want to do is absolutely get all the water out of the jetter that we can before we put antifreeze to it. Because we don't want any intermingling of water and antifreeze. It would just dilute the antifreeze and it won't protect you. So we'll drain the tanks. Again, the water drain is right over there. I'm going to open up and I'm going to go ahead and disassemble the strainer because I should be cleaning my strainer anyway, and that gets more water out of the water manifold. Pull my strainer assembly out, wait for the drain to finish draining. Put it back together. Again, just needs to be hand tight. I need to close off my drain valve and close. There's a valve that you can't see from here between the strainer and the water tank right in here. I'm just going to push it down so that I don't want my antifreeze to wander back into the main tank. So at this point, I'm all set on my front end, and next thing we'll go into the rear end and actually purge the system. Okay, once we've got our water tank drained, we've got the water valve shut off up there. We're set up where we can open up our antifreeze valve here. This valve, as we open it, is going to allow antifreeze to go into the pumping system. There again, it's very important that the water tank valve is shut off and the drain is closed. Otherwise, you're either going to lose antifreeze to the main tank or you're going to lose antifreeze to the ground. So those valves are closed. Now we can open this valve as we have. So I'm going to take my jetting hose off of the storage point. Basically, our procedure is pretty simple. We're going to start the engines at idle. We're going to turn the water on immediately because we don't want to pump antifreeze into this water tank, like I said. And the system's going to be purging, the antifreeze coming through, purging water out this hose. You'll see clean water for a short time. And then when we see pink water, that's no longer water. It's antifreeze. We'll just pump it into the tank and recirculate. Now, those of you that have this model with DWR style unit, you're going to have this assembly right here, which I'm going to use right today, where you can connect up the jetting hose to this female fitting. And with this yellow valve pointed the way it is right here, it's going to pump the water into this observation hose where we can just watch this as it's pumping, and as soon as we see pink, then we just move this valve up and it'll just recirculate back to the antifreeze tank. Now, those of you that don't have this type of setup, you've got the basic Eagle-200 or Eagle-300, you're just going to be basically holding the hose there and recirculating. Okay, so let's go ahead and use this up. I got to put this in the down position to start. I'm going to start my engines. I put on panel control. It's too much throttle. Notice I went down to idle. That's all we have to do. Boom, I turned my water on, which now is antifreeze on. And it's going to take some time to pump water through this line. So we have to wait it out. As soon as I see pink here, I'm going to move the valve up. Now, if I had the standard model, again, I'd be holding this because I don't have this assembly and just waiting to see pink before I put the hose into the tank. Again, water's just going to the ground. We're about ready to make the switch over. I saw the discoloration change. Now we're just circulating antifreeze to the antifreeze tank. So while this is recirculating antifreeze, I need to exercise the water on off valve for a moment. Now I'm pumping antifreeze to the recirc lines to the tank. I can turn it right back on again. It only takes a moment. Then I'm going to open my pulsator up for about 15 seconds. That pulsation line has water in it, so I need to purge that water out. You can hear the noise of it moving water through, or antifreeze through, excuse me. Close it back up and shut down. Now our system is winterized. We've purged all the water out via the antifreeze. Now when it comes to startup again, it's much simpler. I'm going to close this valve. In fact, I didn't do it now. And when I start up again, I'll fill my water tank. I'll open up the one valve up front. And then as soon as I start pumping water into the system, it's going to push all the antifreeze back into here. So the only thing I've got to do is observe as I see it suddenly turn to water. Then I'm going to shut everything off, take my hose off here, and go back to jetting. Let's do some live jetting here. We've got a 6-inch sewer and there's some sharp edges on that 6-inch sewer. We're going to go ahead and set up with the full tiger tail, and you can see I've connected my leader hose here. Sometimes this male-female connection might make this whole thing a little too long and straight for say a 4-inch or a 3, but in a 6-inch this is a good situation that I can have this safety leader hose on and get that nice warning of orange when my nozzle's getting close to the exit of the pipe. And that again is the biggest safety concern. You do not, under any circumstances, want the jetting nozzle to come out of the line under pressure. So this gives us a nice warning. I'll go ahead and tighten this up. If you're gonna jet directly with the green hose or any hose, it's great to put tape marks on there to give you again that warning that the nozzle is getting close and close to that exit and you could get hurt. Okay, so, but with this situation, it's a male-female connection on here, so pretty simple. You just thread one into the other. If you keep the male threads in good shape by not dragging your hose end around on the asphalt, you don't need to use any Teflon tape. You just double snug it up and it'll hold pressure. Okay, we need to go through the tiger tail guide first. You can see I've got a tether rope tied off here so that when I put the tiger tail in the line, it won't disappear on me. I'll go ahead and shove the hose through and then connect up my nozzle. I'm going to go ahead and use a Reaper nozzle in this situation. I do not recommend just hand tightening your nozzles. They can disappear in the line, and premium nozzles are not cheap. So you want to make sure they stay on there. There we go. If I was going a long way in there, I would definitely double wrench that. So now I can push into the line. I have the curl of the hose kind of facing the direction that the pipe's going to go. Drop that tail guide in there. Now we showed you the manual operation before, and if you're going to run manual, you turn to panel control, and then you can turn your engines on. And it's important, again, as soon as you turn the engines on, the pumps are wanting to pump. So any of the stuff you do, even if you're just warming up the engines, there needs to be water in the tank, okay? Otherwise you're running dry, and we don't want to do that. But if I was running manual, I'd go ahead and start. It'd be warming up, and then I can use the water on-off control to control jetting. But most of you will be using the wireless remote, and that's how I'm going to work here. So I'm going to switch to remote control with the key. Then I can start up, on button, start, on button, start, and give it a moment to warm up while I set my hose. I'm setting the hose reel to unwind. Now I can use my remote to pay out some hose. Pretty handy. I like to get well into the line before I get started. Then on the top left, we have the pressure button. That starts moving water through the hose to the nozzle. I'll throttle up, let's do some jetting. Right, there we go. I just ran the hose out a ways, did some cleaning. You saw I pulled back, and I worked a little area by moving the hose back and forth, which would be like working through a root mass or tearing out some grease or whatever it might be. And then as I was rewinding there, again, I rewind slowly because I want to scour the pipe real well. You don't want to pull the hose back too fast and skim over your cleaning task, especially if you're moving debris. Then of course when I saw my marker, the orange leader hose, or if it was a tape mark on my green hose, that gave me that warning to stop. And I like to throttle down first and then hit the jetting off button or the pressure off button. You don't have to. In an emergency stop situation, you can just kill the pressure, you can kill the engines and call that an E-stop. But in typical mode, I'm going to throttle down first. I'm going to stop the jetting, and then if I'm done, turn the engines off as I did. Being that we have a electrically powered hose reel, I can wind up my reel and whatnot, even with the engine off. So I can pull this up, Just got to watch that joint going through the reel, and then pull everything out. And then I can secure the area and put away my jetting tools. Okay, now that we're putting everything away, let's talk about hose management. Okay, jetting hose of all types pretty much has a fiber braid inside, which is great. It makes it lightweight versus like a steel braid of a hydraulic hose. But most jetting hoses, all jetting hoses are susceptible to kinks. Okay, and what we want to avoid is letting it get into a tight curl like this, because most of the kinking that happens with jetting hose happens when you're winding the hose up, not necessarily when you're going into the pipe. Okay, so let's just say with your wireless remote control, you'll be working on the roof, away from the jetter. This was an ideal, easy place to jet. But a lot of times you'll be jetting well away from the machine and you're gonna stretch out a lot of hose. So when you're winding that hose up, what I like to do is, whether it's 100 feet, 200 feet, or 50 feet, or even 20 feet, I like to lay it out in a nice big loop. Okay, so this will avoid a curling problem, because I could have my back to the hose and I'm winding up, and if it catches on something and has a curl, it's going to kink, right? So we just want to stretch out in a nice big loop. I might stand on the end, and then I can wind up the hose, keeping it in a nice controlled big loop, and wind it up, and I don't have kinking problems. And again, we want to avoid kinks, because any kink will become a weak point, and that's where the hose can rupture. And a hose rupturing just becomes a nozzle a lot of times, and that's right there going through your hands. So this is very important from a safety point of view. Avoid kinks, and again, always inspect the jetting hose for chafes and cuts, and service it and replace it. Replace the hose end if necessary. All right, there you have it. The training sessions for the Eagle-300 and Eagle-600 trailer mounted jetters. Really appreciate your purchase. Appreciate you choosing Jetters Northwest. Again, take a look at YouTube. Our Jetters Northwest YouTube channel has a lot of videos that go well beyond what we've talked about today. Some real specific stuff as to nozzles and applications. But again, if you have any questions or thoughts or need an idea, give us a call at 877-901-1936 or email info@jettersnorthwest.com. And we also have a shopping site online, shop.jettersnorthwest.com. Covers all kinds of nozzles, accessories, and some smaller machines for special uses. We want to be here to help you solve your jetting needs. Again, this is Jonesy, Jetters Northwest. For the team, get out there and get jetting.